Michigan had one of the toughest schedules really in all of college football in 2024. I think that's a big reason why they had the type of season that they did have. You look at some of their opponents like Illinois. We thought that might be an easier game. That turned out to be a tough game. You look at Indiana, not expected to be a tough game. Things like that. And we're going to break the schedule down for you, and again show you all the new opponents, who they lost, who they added, all of that as we look at this 2025 schedule, which is I'll go ahead and tell you it's much easier. Here's the full schedule. And we'll start with the non-conference. So they'll play New Mexico, at Oklahoma, and Central Michigan. So Oklahoma, that's going to be a tough game, especially on the road, but not as tough as Texas last season. So I think that is a little bit easier. Again, the difference is the fact that they do have to play this game on the road. So that will be potentially a tricky game, probably a defensive battle. Oklahoma should have a very solid defense. So that should be a fun one there early in the season. How about the home and away here for Michigan? They've actually got 6 home games and 6 road games. So 6 and 6 here. New Mexico, Central Michigan, Wisconsin, Washington, Purdue, and Ohio State all at home. And then on the road, it's Oklahoma, Nebraska, USC, Michigan State, Northwestern, and Maryland. What's interesting here is the fact that they have 4 home games in the conference and 5 road games. Usually teams kind of schedule this where if they have the 4 home games and the 5 road games, they'll make their big non-conference game at home to kind of even that out. So you have 5 home, 5 away in terms of Power 4 opponents. But they're only going to have 4 Power 4 games at home, and they're going to have 6 Power 4 opponents. They'll be playing them on the road. So that's interesting when you look at the schedule. Again, you look at the teams and you look who they play, it's a very favorable schedule. But the fact that they do play 6 Power 4 teams on the road makes it maybe a little bit tougher than you might think. So how about the changes? So in the Big Ten, they lost Minnesota, Illinois, Oregon, and Indiana. Those were 4 of the top teams of the Big Ten. You look at, of course, Oregon. They were at the top. Indiana was right there with, close to being in the Big Ten championship game. Illinois was a surprise team. They had a great year last year. Even Minnesota was pretty good last year. They were in the top half of the Big Ten. So you lose 4 quality teams, 4 very good teams, and then they add Nebraska, Wisconsin, Purdue, and Maryland. So this is what you like to see if you're a Michigan fan. Wisconsin is reeling right now. Honestly, I don't think they're going to be great next year. Purdue's possibly going to be the worst team in the Big Ten again. So you've got those games. You got Maryland. They were not very good last year. No reason to expect them to really bounce back and have a great year this year. The toughest game they add, I think, is going to be that Nebraska game. Now, this is a program that's trending in the right direction, and that game is going to be on the road. But you would take this trade all day long. Again, 4 of the top teams of the Big Ten, you get rid of them, and then you add maybe only 1 decent opponent. That's a very favorable schedule in the Big Ten. So they'll play New Mexico week 1, August 30th. Then it's a quick road trip there at Oklahoma, September 6th. Going to be a big game for both teams. The loser of that game, could have a pretty rough season. The winner will have a great opportunity the rest of the way. You got Central Michigan on September 13th, and then it's at Nebraska on September 20th. So that new opponent, that's the tougher new opponent there in Nebraska, playing them early. You look at those first 4 games before the first bye week, not horrible, but there are 2 tough road tests, Oklahoma and Nebraska, and those are both games Michigan can win, but those are also, I would say, both games that they could potentially lose. So that first month is really, again, going to give us a good indication of what to expect from Michigan this next season, because after that, there's not a lot of really tough challenges. Again, there are games that they could lose, but not a lot of games where you're like, oh, Michigan's going to have a really hard time. No, I mean, they've got a good shot in the rest of these games, really all the games that they play. I wouldn't point to the schedule and say there's any game that Michigan will be a big underdog in, maybe a slight underdog in a couple of these games. They got Wisconsin on October 4th, and then it's at USC on October 11th. Going to have to travel out west. We'll see how that goes. Washington at home on October 18th. And then it's on the road at Michigan State October 25th and Purdue at home November 1st. A couple of tough road tests there with USC and Michigan State potentially. But just looking at the opponents that, in this 5-game stretch, Michigan should be better than all 5 of those teams. So that's not a horrible stretch. Then they get their second bye week. Back-to-back road games, but against teams that will be more than likely near the bottom of the Big Ten. Northwestern and Maryland. again, anytime you go back to back on the road, that could be a little bit of a challenge, but these are both teams that Michigan should be able to beat even on the road. And then you've got the game at the end of the season, November 29th, Ohio State. Ohio State's going to potentially be, in a little bit of a rebuilding year this year, and the game is at home. So Michigan, obviously we all know they're going to have a great shot to win that game. Look at what they've done the last few years. So that's a big game there at the end. But again, when I look at the schedule, I just don't see anything that really worries me if I'm a Michigan fan. Now, I'm not saying they're going to win all these games, but they're at least going to have a chance to win, a really good chance to win every game on this schedule. So it's very favorable. So let's see how it stacks up with the other teams in the Big Ten in terms of conference opponents. And you see right there, if you look at the winning percentage from last season, Michigan is at the very bottom. They have the easiest schedule in the Big Ten, again, based off of these teams' win percentages last season. 27-54, their opponents, just a 33% win percentage. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the easiest schedule this year, because there could be some teams that are better than we think, that have a big bounce back from last year, like Nebraska, for example. Maybe USC bounces back and they're closer to the top. So there are some things that can happen to make this schedule a little bit tougher. But I think regardless, Michigan definitely is going to have one of the easier schedules, if not the easiest schedule in conference play in the Big Ten.